This is a market we're going to. Walking in, I really highly suggest you just hold the camera down by your side like it's off. They're very strict about no camera policy. It's so busy. A lot of the parts here are remanufactured, recycled. Some are new, some are fake. Replacement batteries and screens for Samsung tablets, backings for Samsung tablets. And then you see back over there, see those big chests of safes over there? All cash. If you want to buy cases for your iPhone to sell like new, you can buy empty boxes. These are just empty boxes they're selling. So this woman is selling iPhone 5Cs. Those are not new, but authentic. They're used and recycled. Another guy here swapping out parts casually. All the tools you need to repair phones, like the vacuum chambers, the wire cutters to remove the screens, jigs to like hold everything in place and align up the screens, the incessant cracking of packing tape. That's a sign of a deal closed. And then you pop out here in a suburbia. Welcome to the suburbs.
Oh my gosh, I love Shenzhen. You can't talk bad about Shenzhen.
Shenzhen started from a fishing village.
From 300,000 to 10 million.
14 million.
20 million.
No cities in the history of human civilization as we know was able to do this.
深圳为什么成功？就是要拓荒，就是要突破这种盘根错节的束缚，进行改革开放。
Shenzhen is creating more millionaires than any other cities in China.
I mean, they can do everything. The factory of the world. People don't understand this.
It could be Europe, US, anywhere else. You're about 9 months behind us when it comes to technology, and that's just a fact.
The model that is being developed in Shenzhen can actually be quite threatening for models that had already been established and very successful in other parts of the world.
I do think that the core tenets of sharing IP that they have is extremely enabling.
It's a cultural change. It will take a while, but the future is possible.
It's not that Silicon Valley got divorced from technology. They're very much about technology. They just kept moving up the stack. And the key thing that drove that, in my opinion, was Moore's Law. Moore's Law is named after Gordon Moore, who was one of the founders of Intel. In like 1960s, he came out with a paper. He predicted that every 2 years, I believe it was, the number of components that could fit in the same piece of silicon would double. And so in 1 year, you could fit 10 transistors in here. 2 years later, it would be like 20, then 40. A decade on, you're talking about like millions and then billions. Imagine you have a printer and you're printing pages and you want to be more efficient. Well, you go from a 12-point font to a 6-point font, fitting twice as many characters on one page, and you're getting twice as much information out of your printer all in one go. And that's literally all Moore's Law has been, is reducing the font size of circuits. In the 70s and 80s, there were many failed research attempts to build parallel computers, right? Computers that were like, the Cray machines and the thinking machines, 60,000 processors, and scale up. And what you found was that if you spent more than 2 years of research time to try and double the performance of your computer, it was by far cheaper just to sit back and wait and let guys like Intel just move Moore's Law ahead and buy the next fastest processor. And so what you found was that actually being in hardware wasn't profitable. And so what really sold products back in the day was features.
Well, one of the things you can do with Windows 98 is similar to the web. You can navigate on your hard drive using the backwards and forwards buttons just like you would on the web.
The first generation of Windows that would come out and a new generation would be so slow, it'd be completely unusable. And then 2 years later, like, oh, it's actually kind of okay. And then 4 years later, it's like zipping along. It's not because Microsoft made it faster. The computers got faster for free. And so people are able to now not have to worry about writing detailed stuff in C code. They could use high-level languages. They're able to use like web pages, and then JavaScript comes along. And with all of that sort of fervor going on and people chasing that innovation, there was no value in soldering parts. There really wasn't.
In 1983, worldwide sales of personal computers increased 76%. But last year, the increase was only 19%. And this year, analysts predict that sales growth will slow to about 4%. Losses among the two largest home computer makers through June of this year surpassed $600 million.
And that building of stuff had to go to an economy where people were paid a lot less. And what you see is now that Silicon Valley, the whole tech ecosystem is sort of like driven as far as the road goes, and now Moore's Law sort of is ending or ended, and the car is still kind of gliding off the cliff, right? But there's no more road underneath it. and they're like, huh. Like computers just aren't getting that much faster anymore. And so now you're seeing people going through a phase of optimization, which is great. But at the same time, people are like, okay, well, how do we differentiate my product, right? Like optimization sucks. That's not a great business model. Because now we have supercomputers in our pocket. Now the question is, what do we do with it, right? And what does that thing in my pocket not already do? And so people are realizing there's niche markets for hardware. We need to have a small accessory. You're gonna have like my Fitbit, all these little things, my little digital locks, my smart homes, my sensor networks, the IoT sort of stuff coming up. And they say, great, we need to figure out how to build this. And now they're coming back to this ecosystem and being like, oh, you guys know how to solder. We forgot about that. That's really good. Can you help us build these things?
What should we say?
When I was 18, the first time I go to US, I use a trash can and like wood, vacuum cleaner, build the very first ping pong robot.
Well, you want a robot that's just like you, but slightly better, so you always feel challenged.
I dropped out from university after first year of college. I decided to go for this path. And it's really nice to be in HAX because HAX is the best educator and help you grow.
HAX is a hardware accelerator, the world's first hardware accelerator. We take teams that come in with a proven technology and a prototype and help them to get ready for market launch. We provide $100,000. We help them with electrical engineering, design for manufacture, industrial design, mechanical engineering, their market strategy, how they're going to launch, and for that we take 9% equity in the startups.
I'm Thomas, co-founder of Rovenso, and at Rovenso we make big robots. We use a kind of spatial joystick. It's usually used in surgery, these things. It's a force feedback joystick. The market that we target is the one of nuclear decommissioning. And what you can see here is a small version of a robot. And now at HAX we are building the very big version. So you can compare the wheel size, that will be something quite huge. The bigger version of the robot will transport a robotic arm to automate some of the part of the decommissioning work.
Shenzhen's, as everybody now knows, the hardware capital of the world, right? So this has been our home ever since the start. The reason we come here and take the teams here is because of the ecosystem around, which helps them to build products really fast, and from initial concept all the way up to final product release into the market.
Neura is a headphone company. We're making the world's first tunable headphones. They work out how you hear and provide the perfect music for you. So I can show you here the hearing profiles of my colleague Luke and my hearing profile. What you can see is that there is this difference at certain frequencies between the way that Luke is sensitive to that particular note or sound, the way that I'm sensitive to it. What our headphones do is sonically mold the sound and make sure that what we hear is not too bassy, it's not too trebly, it sounds balanced, it sounds even, and it sounds the way that it was recorded.
Anybody who's going through research and development, they're better off doing it here because they can get things made so much quicker and so much cheaper. I mean, you try doing something like that in the UK, it'll take you around a month typically to make something which is a specialist from an engineering firm. Here you can do it in a couple of days.
Let's say we completely design a new robot. We can get it out pretty much in a week. Even if there's 10 parts, we can send it out or we can do it ourselves. So you get 10 3D printers to print at the same time, and you get all the parts, put it together, and just fire. I've never seen any prototyping like that when we were in States.
For some of the standard parts, we can order in the morning, and then we get it in the afternoon or the day after. We can get manufactured parts in in a few days. In Switzerland, we were planning to do this robot in 9 months. And here we have the opportunity to make it in 3 months. So it's really a race.
If you look back through the years, like obviously Shenzhen became a manufacturing hub very, very quickly. And not that long ago was literally rice paddies.
Academic-wise and in popular media, it's usually summarized in one sentence, which is that Shenzhen was a small sleeping fishing village, and then because it was designated as a special economic zone, it became a metropolis overnight. That singular sentence is what I'm trying to demystify through my work. Today, exactly how many people live in Shenzhen is a mystery. The number 10 million is used more as a reference. So from 300,000 to 10 million, this population grows. No cities in the history of human civilization as we know that was able to do this. Prior to 1980s, China was in a very poor economic state. There was a stagnation of industry, there was a planned economy, no one was allowed to own business. It was a very poor country. The leaders in Beijing have been thinking about what can they do to try to lead the country out of poverty.
当时的这个整个的大陆这边的经济受这种极左思想的束缚，整个经济陷入这种困顿状态。这张图呢，就是反映了当时77年的时候，深圳这个地区和香港那边的这个居民收入的一个对比，差了很多，有10倍的差距。这个人民生活越来越差。这个呢，就是很有名的这一句话，就是邓小平在他来调研的时候说呢，这是政策有问题，不是部队能管得了的，所以我们要调整这个政策，才实行了改革开放。
They set up the 4 special economic zones, each of them next to a already developed economy. The ambition was simply what can the country do to generate jobs, to generate economy, to feed the people. Essentially, it was a very actually modest intention. Under the planned economy, there was a social safety net. Every person was rationed with food coupons, clothing coupons, electricity coupons. It was only in Shenzhen you can buy a piece of bread with money. To be willing to come to Shenzhen, to the special economic zone, to try to create something else. It attracted people who wanted to have more freedom.
这张照片呢是当时的一个工厂华强那个南洋电子厂。这张照片好，就是当时的工人正好要去上班这个就是当时人们生活面貌的一个反应因为深圳人民对邓小平的感情很深没有小平就没有深圳。当时92年，小平又一次来深圳视察所住的那个宾馆的房间的情况。这一台是深圳的第一台 ATM 机，你把它钱塞进去，马上会出来一个金额你把那个钱整理好之后呢，写一张条多少钱，塞到这个窗口里面去，后台人员给你处理。它并不是说像现在，当时赋予的它的使命呢，就是技术、知识、对外政策的窗口我们要引进国外的先进的知识和理念所以就是说，在深圳这边先试验成功了，再向这个全国来推广。这是小平说的“摸着石头过河”这个石头就是深圳。
What to me was remarkable about Shenzhen is that even the planners themselves would tell you that the city evolved in a way much bigger and faster than they would have predicted. I think it's overly generalized to think that Shenzhen was nothing and then with this set up special economic zone suddenly it became a city. It didn't. There is something else that's not answered simply by top-down planning.
Yes, so good morning. Thank you all for joining me in a discussion about innovation that is happening right here in China. We're investing with you, the developer community. We have been investing in open source solutions because we know that when there are standards and when there are open source offerings, that the pace of technology innovation and the pace of technology adoption accelerates.
I think for the past 100 years, the Industrial Revolution put us into small cages. Consumerism has killed a lot of creativity. But for the post-industrial generation, they should have more freedom to create, to explore, to invent. I think through Maker Movement, we are bringing it back.
So we're here with the MakerBot Cupcake CNC, which is a 3D printer. You can build things like Tom York's head, because he actually open sourced the data that was filmed for a video of his. Now what's also interesting about this whole scenario is that there's a whole thriving community of users who are taking these to build all kinds of different objects. They're sharing the objects online, and additionally they're sharing information on how to build and improve upon the design. Everything is completely open sourced, the software is open source, the hardware is open source. I just can't wait to see what people come up with.
I think the recent emergence of the maker movement pretty much started around 2003, 2004 in the US. Laser cutting and 3D printing is helping people to be able to build stuff and actually build it for fun rather than just having business purpose.
Right around that time, this guy named Dale Doherty, he was thinking about starting a publication called Make. Before Make came out, the only word we had was a hacker, right? And I think he didn't want to call the magazine Hack because it had a really negative connotation at the time. And Make was sort of the thing you would type to compile a program, so it would resonate well with programmers. And Maker was like sort of the demonym of people who would read the magazine. That sort of coined the term maker. I think in creating that publication, he sort of solidified the movement, and the Maker Faire created that phenomenon.
In China, in the beginning, nobody knows about makers. Nobody cared about makers, but because we go to the maker fairs in New York, in Bay Area, we're so jealous. So instead of waiting for someone to do it, we say, why don't we do it?
When they told me they were going to bring the first Maker Faire here, I was like, how do you have a Maker Faire in an area where people don't make for a recreational thing, they do it for a job, right? You know, because making in the West is something that you're using to remind people who are in service economies that there's a thing called manufacturing, right? When you have a manufacturing economy, you want to remind them that there's manufacturing, it seems weird. And what I realized is that actually China's middle class is the size of the entire United States population. So even if a small section of Chinese people had risen to the upper middle class, it's big enough to create a movement in China itself compared to the United States scale of making.
We don't know if it's going to be successful or not. The first year we have over 60 makers, and last year we have over 200 makers. It's a huge number.
Some interesting phenomena also emerging out of this in the past years. What's happening is the open source hardware movement. Traditionally, the circuit board is closed and proprietary. You need to have a contract, a non-disclosure, and a huge sum of prepayment in order to get access. But with open source hardware, everybody can access to that information, and everybody can modify that to suit their need. People here, they create a circuit board, and just under the expectation, it is going to be open. It's going to be copied and evolved by someone else. There's no one running around in Shenzhen and say, okay, well, I should be credited for creating this. If someone else can make this, get someone else to use it, merrier the better. Not having the ego attached to your creations and understand how actually an open source system works. The maker movement is at that junctures.
I'm getting a little sick of hearing about the same people on TV over and over and over again, so I decided to do something about it. This Arduino project, which I called the Enough Already, will mute the TV anytime any of these overexposed personalities is mentioned. To mute the TV, I'm going to use an IR LED. Now, anytime a keyword is mentioned, the TV will mute for 30 seconds. Our producers caught up with Kim Kardashian earlier today. It should do a pretty good job of protecting our ears from having to hear about the details of Kim Kardashian's wedding.
Arduino is becoming the trigger point because it has so many millions of makers using that.
This is a prototype we're trying to make, a robot arm for the people who have Parkinson's diseases.
We want to make a spoon like this, and if you just shake here, and stable. If we come to Shenzhen like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it will be very difficult for a maker to tap into the resources. But now you have so many resources. It's in the middle of a reforming. So the big company, especially the silicon providers like Intel, like ATML, like TI, they look at that, oh, we have new customers. We have new possibility for new future applications of our technologies. So they make their own controller board, like Edison, like Curie. So they want to tap into the early stage of the development of the applications.
Now this board is based on the Intel technology. It's a tiny dual-core computer system. It has Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and it runs a Linux operating system on it.
I think part of the reason Intel's having to sort of turn that way, they know their roadmap as well as anyone else does. They kind of define Moore's law, and they saw the bridge go out from underneath them before anyone else did. They managed to drive technology like this, and then the other foundries like TSMC and UMC have always trailed behind, but now they're slowing down, everyone's catching up. They're like, oh God, we're looking for air and trying to find a place to move. And so they've struggled to keep up with the phenomenon they created. They haven't made headway into mobile, and those are the most ubiquitous computer today. They're missing out on a huge market opportunity. And so to the extent that they're trying to figure out how to adapt their innovation model to something more flexible, and so they really want to make sure the Intel brand is in front of the youth to make sure that they remember that Intel is actually like a thing that they want to design with later on, and not just, you know, something out of reach.
We have tried to introduce it to 9 years old. This thing is a little bit difficult, but it's acceptable. You do not need to write any boring code. In a smart node, you can just drag and drop and link them together.
What they're doing is they're learning how to code on a computer, translate that into hardware, and they'll build a project on our laser cutter or our 3D printer for something to accept a stimulus, light, motion, or sound, and then output some result. Last year, one kid built a key reminder for his mom so that when she left the house, a motion sensor would pick up her movement and say, hey, don't forget the key. And it's kind of funny to hear that an 8-year-old will know whether he wants to be doing mechanical circuits or just a purely software experience.
So that's entry level, and then we give them more systematic introduction to how to build up the skills. Off you go, you can use the makerspace to create whatever you want. You are genius, you are young inventors.
I've seen some great examples of open source hardware being used to actually make a difference and create a better world. The difficulty is monetizing that, because I do believe that business solves a lot of the world's problems, and people need to be able to make money. If you're providing value to the world, which is making the world a better place, then there should be compensation for that.
In 2010, I started the first makerspace in China called Shenzhen. I got invited a lot to give a talk about open source hardware. The first question always come up on people's mind is, well, how do you protect your intellectual property, and how can you make money if you don't protect your intellectual property? I got that question in Shanghai, I got that question in Beijing, I got that question everywhere I go. But when I give the same talk in Shenzhen, the reaction I got is, so what's new about this? We've been making money on this for 20 years.
这个地方是全球最大的元器件的集散地，这里总共1楼、2楼现在有800多家，将近900家的，全是做 IC 的。
The reason we're here in Huaqiang Bay is literally because of the electronics markets. You know, it's a fantastic resource of all different possible components and different devices which can kind of be Frankenstein together to make prototypes by the teams. It's a source of inspiration. It's a source of discovery of new products that could potentially be taken to the West. Like I see every month a different invention down there. 9 times out of 10 they're probably not going to make it to the West, but some of them do.
这一个是很能代表华强北的创新模式的，就是你既可以用来给手机充电，又可以用来暖手。这一款产品呢，是刚好是我们学校的一个人发明的。它就是这个东西要装在羽毛球托下面，就是你打球的时候，它会给你记录数据，你的力度，还有你的今天挥了多少次拍。
You can get a little bit of a feel here, what's even upstream of what's going to hit the tack in the United States. You see a couple of things popping up here or there. A little shop will pop out of nowhere selling these things you hadn't heard of before. Like the hoverboards were here a couple of years before they hit the United States. And then you eventually sort of see them hit the States and other countries.
这里就是最具华强北特色的地方，这里都是一个一个的小创业者，但是他们做的东西全是全球最新的，而且出货量很大的东西。这个是一个3D 眼镜，3D 手机壳，拿过来之后，这里就是 3D 效果的电影。
There's a number of different ways to sort of look at the market. For an engineer, you're sort of limited at thumbing through catalogs and looking at pictures and very slowly going through specification sheets. For example, if you want to put a switch in a product, you want to know how it feels. You want to kind of know the exact size and the little mountings and the fussy bits. And it can take a long time to find exactly the right part. You come here and they're like stalls with like hundreds of different types, and you can just reach in and just touch them and play with them, and you can like walk stall by stall and see all the different variety. And it's not just a showroom. Once you find the switch you like, you can be like, hi, I'd like to buy 1,000 of them, and then for a very low price, you can just over the counter buy it, carry it off, and go into production.
You can fix your phone here. 告诉他们这个是我们的朋友，靠得住的。就给个实价就行了，150。
也是拿手机练嘛，拆解，时间久了就，也不是各个地方嘛。这个已经好多年了。
It's got a huge amount of acquired knowledge and skills. There's electrical engineers there who solder up 50 PCBs for you in record time. You can go down there and piece together different components to make a new mobile phone. There's nowhere else in the world you can do that. You can get like a chipset that was in a notebook, for example, for less than $15, which can enable computing power inside a new product. That's a fantastic resource for some of the startups. That kind of philosophy has kind of spread out all around China.
他们在里面的，他们都是一个像修手机都是一个圈子，他们相互之间都会认识。可能他某一个人他只会做一个部分的功能，另外一个部分的功能呢，他会交给他的另外一个朋友去做，所以他很快就可以把这个东西做好。在华强北呢，有的人他就会设计，有的人呢他就会把这个产品生产出来，有的人呢他会卖，所以他们之间全是合作的关系。所以呢，在这里呢，他生产研发一款产品推向市场，时间特别的短。只需要2-3个月的时间，但是这在国际上，传统的行业里面，它需要1年的时间，但在华强北只需要3个月。
气泡的这里有泡，这里有泡，要这里面嘛，所以我要现在的话要一个真空期把
它。基本他们还是属于老一代的创业者，他们老一代的创业者就是学徒制，就有些人先在这里闯荡，然后他就会带徒弟。徒弟学会了之后，就会另外的开档口，开这么一个小店。所以呢，他们的技术就是跟着师傅学出来的模式。
When we're starting to look at the maker coming to Shenzhen, there's this excitement on how open the system is, like nowhere else. You can buy all sorts of stuff. Everything is available in volume. But in the West, there's a binary distinction between the makers and the hardware startup. The maker, you do this for fun, you do this for your passions. But when you're starting to make this into a business, you should forget about sharing, you should forget about all this open stuff and focusing on the business. But in here, there's very little differentiations between I want to make this for fun and I want to make this for profit. There's no binary division of the mindset of makers versus startup. Maker and startup in China is a continuum. you shouldn't be stopped from making money out of the thing you love to do. And you should not be forced to choose between open and proprietary just because you want to become a business. Right now it's just in the West. We haven't seen an open source hardware system working.
这个是苹果的 logo， 是这里自己做的，但是做的和真的是一模一样的。然后呢，后面的文字，这些文字旁边也可以做的完全一模一样。
地方打图。
对，其实更恐怖的是 iPhone 还没有在大陆出现，这里已经有了一笔完全的高仿了，就一模一样的。但是其实它的质量也不差，就是它一模一样的。iPhone 是7000多是吧？但其实呢，在1:1的纯高仿只要1000块。
In the West, there's an idea that I can have a company that produces nothing, has a ton of patents, but produces money by suing everyone for rights to those patents. You don't even have inventors, you have lawyers making money off of buying intellectual property and trading it. That's weird, right? It's kind of weird that you produce nothing but make a lot of money. The idea that you can take an idea in a world that's this big and say exactly one person owns the right to it globally, like Apple has the right to the phone with rounded rectangles. They're the only people who can produce that. Really? Like, seriously? This is the world we're going to live in? Like, we just give people monopolies through the IP system for 20 years for stupid ideas because they were first to file. That made sense back in the day when there were fewer people, less innovators, a less connected world. Now we have like this network of people where like we're empowered to do our things and we can almost trade our creativity. And China's ecosystem is this network ecosystem of an idea for an idea. Like let's trade. You know, you realize your place in the ecosystem is I need other people around me. You can't be a dick to like all the other guys around you just because you have the patent monopoly on this thing. Someday you're going to be on the bottom side of the chain and you're going to need other people's help. And so you build networks of collaborations with people by sharing in this open source philosophy.
Oh yeah, we have our first copycat. Well, that's not copycat. Let's say it's a fan. The guy reverse engineered from the video you've seen, published the plan of the of 3D models. You can download and print your own one. What we want to do is we want to print it.
All the hardware companies that come in here, of course, we encourage them to patent all of their technology. But we don't expect them to fight anybody who's copying them. We expect them to be moving much faster than anybody who's copying them and coming up with the next thing the whole time and building a brand. And then eventually those patents may get used when they get into a patent trade-off. That's the use for patents, not to stop people copying you. The way to stop people copying you is to make whatever they're copying irrelevant because you've come up with something much better.
A huge barrier, I think, to small companies in the United States is like the patent system and the copyrights and just like left and right, just legal challenges, and you spend a huge portion of your money on lawyers and IP filings and all that sort of stuff. It's a drag. It really is. If you want to be making stuff, you want to be actually working with people and sharing ideas openly and getting things going.
Hi, I'm Shenzhen. I like to invent things. This one is called a solar wheel. You control speed by the leading. This is my latest invention. It's called hover tracks.
Yeah, the hoverboard story is a very interesting example of somebody in America who came up with the intellectual property and then spent a long time fighting manufacturers who were actually creating something which was similar. That's a great example of a case where I would have encouraged somebody not to start like fighting around IP protection. It's better just to build a brand around a really great product. Make sure that you've got, you know, the leading product in the area.
This is really the first time we have a technology product which become widely popular, which become a cultural icon, but we don't have a name for it. It just emerged. More people come in, evolve it, tweak it, evolve it, tweak it. Eventually it will get to a form which will go viral. This is kind of point to the future of how things could happen.
So in Huaqiangbei, you still find Shanghai, there are basically fakes, there are reproductions of established brands. I'll give you an example because this is a contemporary sort of Shanghai smartwatch running on an Android system. The reproductions were really the items that were sought after by people who could not afford the real thing.
My understanding is that the early Shanzai were people who worked for the bigger corporations here, like Nokia, Motorola, Foxconn, and they were some very smart engineers who got sick of the management and are like, look, I can build a phone cheaper, better, faster than these guys can. I understand why they have all this process. I can make it for half the price if we just cut the fat. And they would quit, talk to their friends who they knew were all this upstream suppliers, and they would get together parts and they would build, what were effectively, copycat phones. The key innovations, they're able to do it at much, much lower cost. Just, learning how to walk before they could run, essentially.
The most similar things to the ideas of Shanzai in the West is the idea of Robin Hood. They try to empower the poor with the latest advancement in technology.
Shanzai and the maker movement and the startups, they are very alike. They are very much share the same spirit. Even though they are not from big companies, they feel powerful.
When they talk about people who left the factories and copied a phone, well, that was kind of like the open source stuff that wasn't open source. They just sort of like, oh, the schematics are on the desk. I will conveniently help myself to them, make a photocopy, and then leave the factory with them, right? Was that stealing or was that open source, right? In the West, it's called theft, right? Out here, it's called sharing. This is one of the devices that was a haul from the market. And you can see it has a number of markings on it. This one was the higher grade version. It was 70, 80 bucks US. But when you power it on, you see that it's running a very well-skinned flavor of Android. Iconography is actually pretty good. And then the great thing is this one sports 2 SIM cards, replaceable memory card, and a replaceable battery, and it comes with 2 batteries, which is actually a feature that many local people really want to have. They're unhappy about A, having no memory card slot, and B, having not a replaceable battery.
The companies were able to access very easily the 2 basic components that you need to make a phone. One is the Gumban, which is basically a printed circuit board, and the other one is the Gummo, which is basically the shell. So there were companies specializing in making Gumban and Gummo that had slots for those printed circuit boards that were very easily accessible by companies.
People from the West who are used to sort of month-long development cycles, I'm like, how did I do this? This is amazing. Like, this capability came out of nowhere overnight, but actually it's been honed over like a decade or 2 out of those roots of people, coming out of the big factories and figuring this all out themselves.
Shanghai, there is something that is still going on now, but it is a very small percentage of what is produced in the market. There is a very strong emerging middle class in China that has the purchase power to afford original items that may be more expensive than the reproductions. It is not possible to target new markets just with imitating the established brands. There is a limit to what can be achieved in that sense.
Once they kind of got in a position where they could now build a copy of a phone pretty well, they can now start innovating. They'll take like an Android phone and an iPhone and mash them together and come up with this weird thing that is pretty cool and is different in some way.
If you go in the market in Huaqiangbei, you will find that many people distributing this type of advertisements for companies that are called white brand companies. They will make it for you, assembling various different components, and then you can add your own brand, your own name, or whatever you want, and distribute it as your own item.
Yeah, these are all white label ideas. It's an empty sample, and all of these are different empty samples. So they can go ahead and build it for you on the spot and then order, I don't know, however many you want. And later on, you can actually ask them to go ahead and put your graphic on the print, for example, or maybe, these logos over here.
In the West, our kind of philosophy is, we come up with something really fantastically new that nobody's done before, become the market leader, and we're really successful. The Chinese mentality is slightly different. They look at something that's already on the market, and then they create a much better version of it much quicker. It's not copying, it's evolution of product, which becomes much better than what was out there before.
We grabbed another one on the market there. Looks like a smartwatch, but you'll notice that it only has a single button, and the graphics are made for children. So this is a phone plus GPS module that you can use to sort of report a kid's location. If the kid is in trouble, they can dial their parents. You can see it has like SOS call features. I would bet that probably 80 to 90% of the design material in here is borrowed from other vendors who've used these previously in other smartwatch designs. But people are sharing the IP. The guy who probably shared the IP to them was someone who could sell them chips or motherboards or circuit boards. And so there was some factory backing up that sharing process. They want people to use these things. And that lets these guys try. Like there's many models of this. In fact, when we were buying this, the woman next to us was asking for these and then left it on the table. She said, this one's too thick. Let's go find one that's thinner than this one over here. They probably have less features or less battery life or whatever it is, but the market here can build these different variants and service it because of the phenomenal ecosystem.
Something is really happening. Companies are realizing the importance of having new ideas and being different. So many companies who were involved in the Shanghai before are now looking at design. They are now looking at how to develop innovation in their own companies. The model that is being developed in Shenzhen can actually be quite threatening in other parts of the world. And it's not surprising that many American companies are now looking at models that are developed in China to see how they can adjust themselves.
梦想让世界不断改变，科技让梦想成为现实。我们创造性地提出了独特的 OPM 商业模式，通过自主的原创设计，为客户提供差异化产品的整体解决方案，打造创新、速度与价值三大核心竞争力。梦想在哪里，未来就在哪里。
那么 OPM 就是原创产品策划设计一站式的一个提供商。相对于传统的 OEM、ODM， 我们有什么优势呢？首先，我们有一个产品的产权，像这面展示台上展示的笔记本电脑、平板电脑，就是我们运用 OPM 这种商业模式打造出来的。
So those are some of the products that we make. This is President Obama wearing my headphone with my business partner Mitch Richmond. These people has been here, Akon, What I Am. The Justice picture, my partner Venus Brown. This year is signed by Venus Brown, What I Am. I forgot who signed this. There's somebody famous, I forgot. This is my office. Hi. And that's something I can't live without is my cigar. Like, I can't do shit without my cigar. Sorry, I just cussed. We are not your traditional, like a manufacturer, right? Which is, give me a product to manufacture. We manufacture stuff like a Monster and all that. A Harman Kardon, Creative, Altec Lancy, JBL, all the biggest industry. We actually dominate anywhere between 8 to 12% of the US market on the audio side. But what we're doing so different is we have our own design house. We're able to create some really cool, incredible product.
So here's like design house, some inspiration about what we can do. We have like some instruments, 3D printing, rapid prototyping. This team is designing some characters in 3D. This is a game. It's interactive learning. In China, a lot of factories are very traditional. So this is also very a new model. The CEO, he tried to break this model, and since 2005, they are producing now for 45 brands, mostly international and mostly in US.
通过 过这个时光隧道呢，我们就来到了未来2030年的一个智慧之家。首先我们看到的是未来的一个智慧冰箱，并且可以看到冰箱里内容物的一个营养价值、产地、生产日期，保障食物的安全。同时呢，当冰箱里食材储存不足的情况下呢，我们直接可以通过下单购买这么一个形式。
You know, most people don't realize it. There's at least 26% of the technology from Silicon Valley actually come from Shenzhen. So what they do is they hire kind of like a headhunter, so to speak, because there's so much innovation. We are about minimum of 8 months to a year advanced when it comes to technology. For example, we have this incredible bed. You can sleep on there. And the moment you wake up in the morning, it will give you stats, how many times you roll over, how much sleep, how much rest you have. And then also can read your blood pressure, can kind of tell you if you have any problem need to be identified. And this is technology existing already today, and we've done this almost 2 years ago.
那么我们的未来洗漱机，它会根据人脸识别技术，识别出我们喜欢哪一类的新闻，并且它还会给我们进行一个个人日程的提醒，以及一个温度的提醒，提醒我们每天应该怎么样穿衣服。
We say like 25% of innovation created in Shenzhen are buy by the American. They buy it, they go to US, and then they sell it here 100 times more expensive. China feel a little bit bored, I think, about this business model. We made it here, but all the credit is for somebody else.
叮咚叮咚，深圳天气。
深圳今天白天到夜间阵雨，温度28摄氏度至23摄氏度。
叮咚叮咚，
持续风向。
暂停播放。
已暂停。
His name is 叮咚。
Everybody is looking for the Chinese startup, made in China. Want the proof to show to the world, like, look, we innovate.
We have a lot of opportunity here. I think our focus should be, let's create a quality product. And you can be proud and say this is made in China. So if you can just focus on that new technology, to focus on a branding and to focus on the quality, and I think within the next 5 years, people have different perspective of made in China. I think that will happen.
送人玫瑰，手有余香，这是深圳一工联的一个口号，就是深圳啊，这个做义工啊，这个有时间了做义工啊，有事儿了找义工啊，成功就是要拓荒，就是要突破这种盘根错节的束缚，进行改革开放。所以刚开始的时候，深圳的工业基础、工业这个档次和水平是比较低的，这是刚开始办工业。经过了20多年的发展呢，深圳逐渐的面临了这种土地、资源、人口和环境方面的这个叫前有追兵啊，这个前有标兵后有追兵啊这种形式，深圳被抛弃了。而深圳怎样才能继续引领经济发展呢？创新。
What has happened in Shenzhen within 35 years of time, its uniqueness is fading because those same innovations, say policy innovation or industry innovation, now it's everywhere in China. So it doesn't have that edge of being the only one or even the first one anymore. It's kind of a catch-22, right? It recognizes what it's been able to achieve, but it's also inherent, like, how are you going to make it better?
People who come to Shenzhen get older, and as the experience grows, they start to develop something new rather than manufacturing. They become engineers, they become brands. Meanwhile, the government is pushing out manufacturing to the outer of Shenzhen.
这个其实就是一台 PC。 然后的话，直接的话，通过它接上显示器或者接上电视机，然后你的电视机、显示器就变成一台电脑了。里面有4G 的内存，128G 的硬盘。因为这个整个$60吧，$60到$90。我们的就是开源的核心的就 GPIO 那个要打开嘛。
A lot of confusion is happening right now. What I'm going to do? What's next? Should I invest in branding or I just close my company? I think it's a perfect moment for innovations because I can attract at least a portion of them, to put the resources to innovate something new.
他自己有研发，有整个的打造成那个叫做精品，他就不再是做山寨，他去做自己的研发，做自己各种自己的品牌。但是现在我们在知识产权这个意识形态上已经非常的强烈。人家抄袭了我，然后他在 AliExpress、在eBay、在亚马逊上卖，我就可以很快的投诉他，他很快就要下架。这个世界我觉得应该是一个开源的世界，特斯拉。 包括说 Facebook、亚马逊，他们把人工智能都是开源的，在安卓的那些都是开源的。任何一种竞争都是基于一种更高级的商业模式的竞争，这是苹果的一种商业逻辑。我真的不喜欢苹果。
I've seen a change in the way that innovation in China happens. There's a fantastic number of Chinese startups that are doing really good products.
Chinese startups are getting better because they want to learn from Europe. If you go to a conference with innovation speakers from France or from Germany or from England or whatever, most of the people will be Chinese in the room. They want to learn.
我从小的话，我从最基层做起，就尤其是这样深圳的这些做山寨的群体。以前的话，中国打压山寨，政府打压山寨，然后国外的人看不起山寨，那是很多年以前。如今，我觉得创客跟山寨原理是一样的。 其实山寨不是说一个仿制，山寨是一种精神，山寨是一种精神，草根崛起的奋斗精神，在我看来，我认为是在中国最有创造力、最有潜力。
In the past 20 years, everybody who wants to make it a Silicon Valley has to go through this very tight and small selection process by a small group of people who are the venture capitalists. Young white males between 20 to 30, controlling how technology will be developed, how technology will be applied, and how technology will be available to the general public. That is the very definition of control economy.
They're ready to have like these massive settlement fights and epic legal battles that go all the way to the Supreme Court and stuff like that. If everyone were like, you know, actually we all do a good job, let's just work and try to figure out how to innovate. But it's a matter of getting critical mass of people to buy into it.
Without a big brand dictating what kind of feature we can have, the Sanzai system is catering to everybody's need. It's not a small group of people who determine what gets developed, when, and how. Right now, we are still at the very early stage of this open source hardware movement. If we trace back to the late 90s, the open source software just got started. I mean, Bill Gates was speaking publicly about how open source is communism and it will destroy the software industry. And hey, today Microsoft is one of the most supporters of open source and even opened up the entire Windows 10. If the history of open source software is used as a benchmark, we are pretty much 5 years away from this being discussed in mainstream. It's a mindset change, but the future is possible.
They talk about, you know, China's authoritarian, there's strong rules and all this sorts of stuff. People here have developed a way to coexist with the rule of law and the way life needs to run. They sort of look the other way at the right times, I think, when things need to happen. This is how we've managed to make sure that everyone gets fairly compensated, everyone's fairly rewarded, and it works through this system. Another thing to be clear is that authoritarian doesn't mean evil, right? It's just that there's one authority. I mean, the Communist Party knows as well as anyone else that they have to keep the people happy. They're not just going to like kick people around because they want to and they want to be trivial and small about it. So they try really hard to put economic policy in place that brings prosperity. One of the things that the government has said is we need a service economy that's tech-oriented and we need to get more young people interested in this, the maker movement. We want to graft that into our system and hopefully inspire another generation of young people to want to become, you know, hardworking factory owners and employers and innovators like their parents were. And now there's even like little maker spaces in cafes and innovation labs like popping up left and right.
这个呢，就是通过这个输入，这个输入什么意思呢？你把它遮了光之后，它这里就会带动这里， 这里呢是一个录音的按键，就是你可以按着这里，比如说欢迎大家来创发咖啡，欢迎大家来创发咖啡。
因为创发咖啡是我们在去年9月份，是由深圳大学和赛格集团然后联合帮助我们去成立的。之后呢，那我们开业的那天的照片是因为在2015年那个李克强总理提出了一个概念叫做全民创业万众创新。那去年呢，政府在扶持创客项目这一块就投入了据说9.3个亿。
如果深圳和国外比的话，第一，政府大力支撑，这是可能是目前只有中国政府能做得到了。
On one hand, it's great that the national government have seen this emergence of new media, new technology, and I think it's genuine to want to support it. However, I don't think there's a very good track record so far of governmental involvement in these more bottom-up activities. We take, for example, art districts, something that was emerging out of China 10, 20 years ago that really caught the imagination of artist colonies, galleries, but as soon as the government started to support it, the inevitable process of gentrification happened. Rent went up, more notable galleries moved in, so the artists who really were trying to experiment had to move out. So I have a concern along similar lines for these tech sectors. The government, in trying to support it, inevitably will formalize it.
It's interesting to sort of see the city evolve. And so there's a sort of wave of money and gentrification. You can sort of rolling from the east to the west and from the south to the north. The pace at which they do it is just crazy. You can walk from one end of the city to the other, and by the time you walk back to the other side, enough of the city will change that you won't recognize it. It's just tearing itself down and rebuilding itself as you walk through it. There's a region over there that was all these little electronic shops. They just leveled it, put up a luxury mall, and put a high-rise on top of it, and you wouldn't recognize it.
I mean, we have more high-rise here than anywhere in the world. I mean, honestly, if you walk around Shenzhen right now, we have over 278 buildings being built, up to 74. I travel all over the world. And when you look at everyone else, like, hey, we are the fastest growing, society around the industry today, and that's just a fact.
In China, there is a general lack of awareness of the negative ramifications of gentrification. Just as, in the 60s, no one in New York thought that was a bad thing. The reason why the city has embraced this notion of new technology is trying to reinvent itself. My concern is that in this reinvention, it wants to very quickly rid of its even immediate past. A city that really struggled, really was dependent on a lot of things that government couldn't provide. Things happened by chance, accidentally. A lot of it was bottom up. In fact, there was not one fishing village, there were 2,000. These villages have evolved along with the city. They have taken up very important roles in providing housing, providing a certain social structure, jobs, a certain stability to the city that was not planned. It simply evolved with the formal city.
I would liken it more like sort of the bacterial colonies in a petri dish. Eventually you grow a lawn of bacteria across it, all the communities become interconnected. But that's sort of the natural growth curve.
We are in Baishizhou, which is one of the more than 300 urban villages in Shenzhen. And here, no matter what, you don't need to go anywhere and you can find everything here. That's the amazing part of this. It provides everything you need for a community.
When the government designated Shenzhen as a special economic zone, they left patches of land for the villagers themselves to build homes.
This is the boundary line between the city and the urban village. This side is urban owned and this is urban village owned.
These urban villages are also breeding ground for a lot of innovation. You can change the structure, you can change the facade, you can spill your workshop into the alleyways. The whole neighborhood was built in this kind of bottom-up way. Shenzhen really represents a new modern image. It's a modern city, it's a new city. The urban villages are complete opposites to that image. The mayor's office declared the necessity to rid the cancers of the society. In those words,
Baishizhou is going to be redeveloped this month, actually, April 2016. So this is how fast 150,000 people who lives here needs to be relocated.
There's some rumors that the market here is eventually going to have to be displaced because as things gentrify, the rent on the shops are going to go up to the point where they can't sustain selling these small parts and whatnot. Just across the street, there's much more urban village going on. That's where we're headed to. And I can't say if it's for better or for worse, but it's definitely, things are changing. And so you transition straight out of the market into, urban village area like this. Personally, I have a bias and I hope that it never goes away because I enjoy it so much and it's such a valuable resource to me. You'll see big districts where people are taking phones and tearing them apart and then another area putting them together into another phone. A lot of sort of recycling and upcycling going on. So you can see down there, there's a person there with a what looks like a pile of trash, but if you look closely, it's just that they're going through mobile phones and stripping out parts from them. It's like shucking corn almost. We'll just take a quick walk through one of these informal areas. This guy's selling iPhone recycled parts. He actually has big bundles of motherboards that they've pulled out of phones that were previously thrown away, and then what they do is they take out the motherboards and they take the chips off and they eventually find their way back down the market. I mean, you can get your roast pig's feet and then iPhone cases. This market itself plays a kind of a critical part in the ecosystem in terms of being able to move goods around. If one factory did a build and they had some excess and they want to get rid of it, a lot of it will come through this market and get recycled through the system. This one's straight from a factory floor. You can see that the motherboards are even still in the carrier. So this one was one that didn't even pass out of Apple, fully fabricated, and it found its way into scrap heap here. Well, people will go ahead and you can already see they've pulled off some ICs for recycling and reprocessing into fixing phones and so forth. Oh, and here's these here are blank motherboards. And the interesting thing about this, you see no solder on it at all. They still have a gold color, which means that there's been no processing of the board at all. It's straight virgin boards from the facility. If you're gonna move on, we're getting a crowd. I can get plenty of useful stuff for a fraction of the price that you would have to, even in the markets, on the main street. That's the stuff that's going away. But those guys will innovate no matter what. They innovated despite the government, right? They'll be there, and they'll keep walking, and they may have cut a path that looked interesting, and that path is now being paved into the road. They'll cut another path. You've never had a fox run over by a steamroller when they're putting a road over a forest. The fox knows how to move away, right? It can run and find another place. And as long as there's continues to be green fields for these people to go to, I think things will be okay. And demilitarizing the Western IP ecosystem would be great, right? I think that's something we can do, right? But it's just as hard as bringing us back from the brink of the Cold War. Everyone has to sort of ease off, universally agree that we need to have a new paradigm. And I think one of the problems in doing that is that the militarization of IP has really benefited the big companies. And if they back off their stance of having huge caches of IP to nuke the little companies that come up, they're threatened by innovation. And so instead of seeing this openness come out, you're seeing exactly the opposite. You're seeing the system calcify. And maybe what will happen in days sure, they'll own their edifices, but they'll become so entrenched that they can't move on, right? Each of them is locked in their space, and then a very flexible ecosystem like China will just roll over them later on, and they'll wonder how that happened. It's because they did it to themselves at the end of the day.
The beautifulness of Shenzhen is if you come here with the talents, with your efforts, your diligence, you can earn a place for yourself.
The makers, the hardware startup, the Internet of Things, producing hardware, they all converge here in Shenzhen. And that's what makes Shenzhen the Silicon Valley of power.
就是工程师的研发的能量和深圳山寨供应链的能量带到全世界。
赋予的它的使命呢，就是我们引进先进的技术。深圳进入了这样一个新的这个历史阶段，有一个新的历史使命，就是有中国梦这样一个阶段啊。
Now, you look at this light switch. Are they straight? Every five-star hotel everywhere in China right now, this is a problem you can identify. This is a perfect example. If we can just have a person take 2-3 seconds to just make that adjustment, China will be a perfect place. Detail.
Are they going to be more like the UK in the sense that they'll just shed their manufacturing background as they gentrify and sort of just go straight for, like, you know, a service economy? Or will they keep rooted in a sort of a manufacturing ecosystem and keep design parallel to it? Or will they just forever stay in manufacturing, right? Is that really just their core base and value and where they want to be? I mean, if China went from where they were to where they are today in 30 years, they could do that again in 30 years. Like within my lifetime, we could see the answer to this question. It'll be interesting to see where the answer ends up. In C code, they could use high-level languages. They're able to use like web pages, and then JavaScript comes along. And with all of that sort of fervor going on and people chasing that innovation, there was no value in soldering parts. There really wasn't.
In 1983, worldwide sales of personal computers increased 76%. But last year, the increase was only 19%. And this year, analysts predict that sales growth will slow to about 4%. Losses among the two largest home computer makers through June of this year surpassed $600 million.
And that building of stuff had to go to an economy where people were paid a lot less. And what you see is now that Silicon Valley, the whole tech ecosystem is sort of like driven as far as the road goes, and now Moore's Law sort of is ending or ended, and the car is still kind of gliding off the cliff, right? But there's no more road underneath it. and they're like, huh. Like computers just aren't getting that much faster anymore. And so now you're seeing people going through a phase of optimization, which is great. But at the same time, people are like, okay, well, how do we differentiate my product, right? Like optimization sucks. That's not a great business model. Because now we have supercomputers in our pocket. Now the question is, what do we do with it, right? And what does that thing in my pocket not already do? And so people are realizing there's niche markets for hardware. We need to have a small accessory. You're gonna have like my Fitbit, all these little things, my little digital locks, my smart homes, my sensor networks, the IoT sort of stuff coming up. And they say, great, we need to figure out how to build this. And now they're coming back to this ecosystem and being like, oh, you guys know how to solder. We forgot about that. That's really good. Can you help us build these things?
What should we say?
When I was 18, the first time I go to US, I use a trash can and like wood, vacuum cleaner, build a very first.
This is a market we're going to. Walking in, I really highly suggest you just hold the camera down by your side like it's off. They're very strict about no camera policy. It's so busy. A lot of the parts are remanufactured, recycled. Some are new, some are fake. Replacement batteries and screens for Samsung tablets, backings for Samsung tablets. And then you see back over there, see those big chests, those safes over there? All cash. If you want to buy cases for your iPhone to sell like new, you can buy empty boxes. These are just empty boxes they're selling. So this woman is selling iPhone 5Cs. Those are not new, but authentic. They're used and recycled. Another guy here swapping out parts casually. All the tools you need to repair phones, like the vacuum chambers, the wire cutters to remove the screens, jigs to like hold everything in place and align up the screens. The incessant cracking of packing tape. That's a sign of a deal closed. And then you pop out here in a suburbia. Welcome to the suburbs.
Oh my gosh, I love Shenzhen. You can't talk bad about Shenzhen.
Shenzhen started from a fishing village.
From 300,000 to 10 million.
14 million.
20 million.
No cities in the history of human civilizations we know was able to do this.
深圳为什么成功？就是要拓荒，就是要突破这种盘根错节的束缚，进行改革开放。
Shenzhen is creating more millionaires than any other cities in China.
I mean, they can do everything. The factory of the world. People don't understand this.
It could be Europe, US, anywhere else. You're about 9 months behind us when it comes to technology, and that's just a fact.
The model that is being developed in Shenzhen can actually be quite threatening for models that had already been established and very successful in other parts of the world.
I do think that the core tenets of sharing IP that they have is extremely enabling.
It's a cultural change. It will take a while, but the future is possible.
It's not that Silicon Valley got divorced from technology. They're very much about technology. They just kept moving up the stack. And the key thing that drove that, in my opinion, was Moore's Law. Moore's Law is named after Gordon Moore, who was one of the founders of Intel. In like 1960s, he came out with a paper. He predicted that every 2 years, I believe it was, the number of components you could fit in the same piece of silicon would double. And so in 1 year, you could fit 10 transistors in here. 2 years later, it would be like 20, then 40. A decade on, you're talking about like millions and then billions. Imagine you have a printer and you're printing pages and you want to be more efficient. Well, you go from a 12-point font to a 6-point font, fitting twice as many characters on one page, and you're getting twice as much information out of your printer all in one go. And that's literally all Moore's Law has been, is reducing the font size of circuits. In the 70s and 80s, there were many failed research attempts to build parallel computers, right? Computers that were like, you know, the Cray machines and the thinking machines, 60,000 processors, and scale up. And what you found was that if you spent more than 2 years of research time to try and double the performance of your computer, it was by far cheaper just to sit back and wait and let guys like Intel just move Moore's Law ahead and buy the next fastest processor. And so what you found was that actually being in hardware wasn't profitable. And so what really sold products back in the day was features.
Well, one of the things you can do with Windows 98 is similar to the web. You can navigate on your hard drive using the backwards and forwards buttons just like you would on the web.
The first generation of Windows that would come out and a new generation would be so slow, it'd be completely unusable. And then 2 years later, like, oh, it's actually kind of okay. And then 4 years later, it's like zipping along. It's not because Microsoft made it faster. The computers got faster for free. And so people are able to now not have to worry about writing detailed stuff.
And it sounds the way that it was recorded.
Anybody who's going through research and development, they're better off doing it here because they can get things made so much quicker and so much cheaper. I mean, you try doing something like that in the UK, it'll take you around a month typically to make something which is a specialist from an engineering firm. Here you can do it in a couple of days.
Let's say we completely design a new robot. We can get it out pretty much in a week. Even if there's 10 parts, we can send it out or we can do it ourselves. So you get 10 3D printers to print at the same time, and you get all the parts, put it together, and just fire. I've never seen any prototyping like that when we were in States.
For some of the standard parts, we can order in the morning, and then we get it in the afternoon or the day after. We can get manufactured parts in a few days. In Switzerland, we were planning to do this robot in 9 months. And here we have the opportunity to make it in 3 months. So it's really a race.
If you look back through the years, like obviously Shenzhen became a manufacturing hub very, very quickly. And not that long ago was literally rice paddies.
Academic-wise and in popular media, it's usually summarized in one sentence, which is that Shenzhen was a small sleeping fishing village, and then because it was designated as a special economic zone, it became a metropolis overnight. That singular sentence is what I'm trying to demystify through my work. Today, exactly how many people live in Shenzhen is a mystery. The number 10 million is used more as a reference. So from 300,000 to 10 million, this population grows. No cities in the history of human civilization as we know that was able to do this. Prior to 1980s, China was in a very poor economic state. There was a stagnation of industry, there was a planned economy, no one was allowed to own business. It was a very poor country. The leaders in Beijing have been thinking about what can...
Ping pong robot. You want a robot that's just like you, but slightly better, so you always feel challenged. I dropped out from university after first year of college. I decided to go for this path. And it's really nice to be in HAX because HAX is the best educator and help you grow.
HAX is a hardware accelerator, the world's first hardware accelerator. We take teams that come in with a proven technology and a prototype and help them to get ready for market launch. We provide $100,000. We help them with electrical engineering, design for manufacture, industrial design, mechanical engineering, their market strategy, how they're going to launch, and for that we take 9% equity in the startups.
I'm Thomas, co-founder of Rovenso, and at Rovenso we make big robots. We use a kind of spatial joystick. It's usually used in surgery, these things. It's a force feedback joystick. The market that we target is the one of nuclear decommissioning. And what you can see here is a small version of a robot. And now at HAX we are building the very big version. So you can compare the wheel size, that will be something quite huge. The bigger version of the robot will transport a robotic arm to automate some of the part of the decommissioning work.
Shenzhen's, as everybody now knows, the hardware capital of the world, right? So this has been our home ever since the start. The reason we come here and take the teams here is because of the ecosystem around, which helps them to build products really fast, and from initial concept all the way up to final product release into the market.
Neura is a headphone company. We're making the world's first tunable headphones. They work out how you hear and provide the perfect music for you. So I can show you here the hearing profiles of my colleague Luke and my hearing profile. What you can see is that there is this difference at certain frequencies between the way that Luke is sensitive to that particular note or sound, the way that I'm sensitive to it. What our headphones do is sonically mold the sound and make sure that what we hear is not too bassy, it's not too trebly, it sounds balanced, it sounds even.